And I made that commitment, and there were some elders there, and they looked at me, and they give me that look, what are you going to do with that? You know what you need to do. That was the biggest change in my entire life. I gave up everything I was doing and started helping people.
Welcome back to the B-Pod. Today I am absolutely thrilled to be talking to Robert Kohel, who is an elder in the Lakota Sundance community and a man who has dedicated decades of his life to service through traditional Native means, and a man that I'm absolutely blessed to have as a friend. And I'm so honored that he decided to come and share his experience with us. So there's a lot here. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Okay, I'm here today with Robert Kohel, who is the founder of the Eagle's Nest Center,
Yeah.
a porter of Lakota Sweat Lodges, and a good friend of mine. And I'm really grateful to be able to call you a friend, and I'm really happy that you're here. I'm really excited, and I like to start these discussions by thinking back to the first time that I meet people. And I remember the first time I met you, it was through a mutual friend that we have. I was working in public health. I knew Emma, and she told me that she takes students to sweat lodges, and I was like, sweat lodge, what's that? And she was like, we're doing it tomorrow. She gave me the slightest bit of information, and so me and my wife at the time show up, and it's just like, what is this place?
What's going on here? Yeah.
Yeah, it was
out in the middle of nowhere. And
yeah, and let's move this a bit. And my experience with it, like my initial reaction was, I just remember how much you guys dealt. This stuck with me with themes of like death and sickness, and I was just like, wow. At the time, I think I was a little bit younger. I didn't have the understandings I do now, and that kind of stuck with me. I was like, these people must have the most sickness and death in their lives, and now I understand that's the nature of life, and to have a mechanism to process, and that struck me. And the other thing was, it was just such a powerful experience that I've been coming back ever since, and I've never experienced anything like it. I've never had a tangible spiritual experience like that. It was just so incredible. And if you wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind starting with a little bit about the ceremony itself. You've been doing it for a while.
Sure. You talked about hearing a lot about death and sickness. Unfortunately, people don't come around when things are going well, and we provide ceremonies. And so often people are needing to come to ceremony to pray about things like that, difficulty in their life, sickness, be it physical, psychological, drug abuse, whatever it may be, or death as well. And that's one thing we just kind of don't like to prepare for. And that's kind of over there. We don't want to think about that.
Yeah.
But yet it'll sneak up on you, you'll start losing friends, losing family, especially when you grow older. You see more of your people making their journey on. And so you have to come to terms with that. I know myself, I'm knocking on the door of 70, and I've had a lot of my own friends pass away. So you think more about that. It becomes more a part of your daily life, taking care of your health and thinking about, each day needing to live to its fullest.
Mm-hmm.
Sweat Lodge, that's a journey all in itself. My life I've worn many hats in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know where to begin with that. Maybe I can go back and start at the beginning, maybe, of my own journey in life. When I was young, my parents were divorced when I was like 3 years old. I don't ever remember my father living in the house. And growing up, I had one sister and then two twin brothers that passed away not too long after birth. And my mom worked really hard to take care of us. And my job growing up, being the oldest, was basically taking care of my sister. And, I know growing up, I was at quite a disadvantage not having a father around. So needless to say, my youth was pretty troubled and had a difficult time, You think about things, the importance of both parents in the family. I'm a firm believer of that. And to be involved with child no matter what, you know. And, you know, a lot of couples, they don't make it, they split up, but yet they parents still together and understand that importance. My father just plain old never was around. You know, a lot of things I looked at on the weekend, my friends were mostly doing things with their dad or something, you know. And then I found myself dealing with that and getting probably angry and bitter as a young boy and getting in trouble, I guess, you know, is what it boiled down to. My mother's German, and my father's side of the family is French and Native American. So growing up, you know, my mother, she wanted me to go to church and do all this and that. And when I would reach out to my father's side of the family, I was learning Native American spiritual concepts. And growing up, I gravitated that way more and more and more and more. And most of my family on my father's side, the native part of the family, are from the Menominee Reservation. And so I'd spend time up there when I was a kid. Some of my native cousins, they knew I didn't have a dad around, so they would like take me fishing, teach me about hunting, you know. And in the native community, everything you do like that, there's a spiritual component to it. So I was introduced to that from young on. I've always been connected to the earth, the world around me, and so that's kind of how that went. But growing up, I got in a lot of trouble. When I was 12 years old, up to that point, things weren't too bad. I had a good circle of friends, but I was in a house fire, and I was burnt really bad, like 68% third degree. And it took me a couple of years to recover from that. And after that, nothing was ever the same. I became much different. You know, I was afraid. I wouldn't even go to the beach, you know, because I didn't want anybody to see all the scarring all over my body and stuff. And I guess it had a negative psychological impact on me. And there was a lot of drugs involved during that time. For pain, you know, and the burns. Back then, we didn't have drug and alcohol programs. Basically, I was on opiates for a year and a half, and then, okay, well, you're healing up now. Good luck with that. So I grew up messing around with a lot of drugs and alcohol and got in a lot of trouble, like I had mentioned earlier, that way. Always searching, trying to fill a void for myself in my life that I didn't understand. And becoming a young man without a father or a male figure as a mentor, looking back now, I didn't understand it then, but I realized I was struggling terribly, trying to find myself, my place, my purpose, you know. So eventually things started, I guess, working out. And I look back today and the things I do and the people I work with, all those experiences from my youth. I know for the longest time I used to wish I had a better life, better childhood, better this, better that. I was kind of resentful about that. But I look back at it now, and those experiences enable me to have such a deep understanding to a lot of people that I've worked with that are troubled and having their own difficulty. And, well, I have Eagles Nest Center, and one of the main things was working with at-risk youth, you know, over the years, because that's been kind of a passion of mine. I have an understanding for that.
Yeah.
I just recently retired from working for the Department of Corrections. 15 years I provided the sweat lodge ceremony for Native inmates in 8 of the state correctional facilities. And when COVID came about, the prison system shut everything down to anybody coming in, volunteers helping, anything like that. So I decided, getting a little older, my health was having some issues. I retired from that. But I remain on as with the state of Wisconsin as a religious services advisor. There's an advisory board, and we have representatives from the Native community, Muslim, Christian, all different faiths, and we all work together to try to provide the best spiritual education for those people that are locked up. So my whole past has kind of dictated my future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I understand, though, is that it wasn't a straight line, right? You've had a lot of careers in the meantime. It wasn't like you went from being a teenager to being a spiritual leader. And so I'm curious about that, like when it kind of came back as an adult and how.
All right. Again, I have to find myself looking back. I mentioned earlier, without a father, male role model in my life, I was trying to figure out how to be a man on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking around, trying to find examples that I could mirror and become a man myself. And again, I stumbled, made a lot of mistakes along the way. But as our society dictates one thing, well, you should have a good job and a man should work hard. And I always wanted my own family someday. And I remember when I was young, I made a vow to myself, someday if I ever have my own family, it isn't going to be like how I had to grow up,
Mm-hmm.
I always looked at getting married and finding someone to share your life with as that's a one-shot deal, So when I met my wife, Judy, we've been together 43 years, 44 years. Yeah, still together. There was a lot of rough times where we could have easily went separate ways. But my stubbornness and my experience as a child, I just worked hard, really hard to make things work. There was a time I drank too much, and I gave that up,
Yeah.
So I haven't drank in over 30 years at all. And that's for young people partying anyway.
Yeah.
You get older and, it just doesn't fit right anymore. It doesn't work right. And you have to be young to handle a hangover anyway. So.
Yeah. But you have told me about that, about the kind of the Lakota ideas around marriage, right? Where it's not so much it's more. I mean, how if you could explain that a little bit, what that means actually.
Well, in the traditional Christian sense, say you have a wedding and you get married and you have your vows till death do you part. How they kind of say that. In Lakota ceremony, it's more a ceremony of joining two spirits together. And when you get married under a traditional Lakota way, under the chanupa, the sacred pipe they call it. And you join those two spirits, and it's not till death do you part. You journey to the next life together. So when you pass away, you consider your spirits are always going to be joined in this world and the next, wherever that may be.
Wow.
So that really gives you a different sense of thinking. This is that important. If we're going to do this, this is going to be forever. Not just until, maybe if it don't work, plan B, a divorce, or maybe when I die, you go on, find somebody else, you'll be free. We don't look at it that way.
Wow.
And it's hard to follow those type of old traditional ways because so many of them have been broken. But going back, I guess I'm kind of veering off track here. I was growing up, I always worked hard. And that's a good thing. I was a good little taxpayer for the government for a long time. And I eventually developed and ran my own construction business. And that went on for a lot of years, maybe 20, 25 years. When we got married, it wasn't too long. My wife had a 3-year-old boy at the time when I met her. And I wound up adopting him. His father was kind of like my father, left, didn't want nothing to do with him. So it's kind of funny how that happened that way.
Yeah.
But I adopted him, and then my wife and I had a boy and a girl after that of our own. And so You know, I work hard to take care of my family. I bought my first house. It was a one-bedroom house. I had me, my wife, and 3 kids. The kids all slept in the basement. I made a bedroom in the basement. You know? But it didn't take too long, a couple of years. I worked real hard and I bought a farm, 80-acre farm with 5 bedrooms. We went from that 1-bedroom house to a 5-bedroom farmhouse. And we're there for a lot of years. And through that hard work, I kind of beat myself into the ground. I broke my back and had to get that fused. I was in my 30s then.
Oh, man.
And the doctors just kept telling me, you have to find something else to do. You're not going to be able to keep this up like this, you know. And it was so hard because that's all I knew. You know, I was building houses, building log homes, doing a lot of different things, like commercial buildings, stuff like that. And it was good. We had good life. But still, even in those years, I was having difficulty. I'd find myself at the bar with the guys after work, you know, instead of going home. It created a lot of problems. And I decided to quit all that. And I tried giving my business to my employees. I asked them if they wanted to take it over, and they didn't want to do that. So I just shut it all down. And that's where I bought the property where you come now. I bought an old campground, and a 40-acre campground, and thought we'd run a campground there. There was a bar there at the time. That's the last thing in the world I needed, you know, at that time. So we shut that down. And we rented to campers, and somehow I wasn't feeling fulfilled. All my life working with my hands, building, and now I'm sitting around this campground, you know. And I met this guy. He's an AODA counselor. His name's Mac. We've become really good friends over the years. And he helped me along with some things because I was starting to have difficulty again with my own spirit. And he helped me get myself back on track back then and spent a lot of time talking to me and trying to figure out what was going on. This is a hard thing for me to say, I guess, but I've come to terms with it. When I was a young boy, I was sexually abused. And yeah, it's hard to talk about, I guess, but I carried that on for a lot of years. And he was one that pointed out to me that this demon is destroying your spirit. You have to come to terms with it. And he said, you need to talk to your wife about this. And at that time, we had been married 20-some years. She never knew. I never said a word to her about that. In my head, I thought if she knew that I had been sexually abused when I would be somehow not good enough then for her. And it was really strange thinking.
Yeah.
And I remember we all got together and sat down, and I finally was able to choke those words out of my mouth and tell her that. Because she couldn't figure out why I couldn't resolve my issues. Well, I wasn't facing them.
Yeah.
And when I had told her that, her response to that was, that's all? You mean I've put up with this all this time? And
I can imagine her saying it too.
Yeah. And I was expecting all this, oh, I'm done now, you know. And it didn't go that way. She accepted that wholly. And that changed everything so much more in our relationship, tightened things up. And I was able to deal with that demon and let it go and talk about it like I am right now.
Yeah.
There was a time I couldn't even think about it without getting angry.
Yeah.
And all this stuff would come welling up in me, you know, and I just want to drink or something, you know.
Yeah.
That's a good way of shutting that voice up for a while. Unfortunately, to keep that voice quiet, you got to just keep doing that, and that's not sustainable. Can't live that way. But then from there we went, now what? So my friend Mac, his name was, the AODA guy, my friend, we spent a lot of time talking. And he called me up one day and he said, we need to go on a little trip. I want to introduce you to someone. And he took me over to Minnesota. And I thought to myself, what's going on? He hauling me out in the middle of nowhere, hide the body or what? You know? And he introduced me to a friend who became real dear, close to me, a man named Ron Luckow, his spiritual leader, a Sundance leader. And when we got there was fire going, stones were being heated, ready for a sweat lodge. And I asked, well, what's up with this? And I soon realized, you know, the dozen or so people that were there were all there to help me.
Wow.
And they realized what the problem was. I was denying a spiritual component in my life. And they took me into the sweat lodge. It was a hot lodge. They wiped me down really good, purified my spirit, you know, and actually woke that up for me. And after that, my friend Ron, he became kind of like a teacher. And he was a Lakota sun dancer. So, you know, even though my family loved Menominee ways and things I learned about growing up, he started teaching me, and I got that education that way. And so I started bringing the spiritual component into my life as regular part of living, which, I look back, that was a paradigm shift in who I was for my life. And like I had said early, I did I lived up to here, stop, forget about the past and all that terrible stuff. Now here we're going to move on. It all started coming together. You know, every day you live is a gift, you know, and you should live it to your fullest, because each day you learn something new, and it all culminates in who you are and that growth each and every day. So even if there's not just good things, but the bad things as well, we learn lessons from them. All came together, and I guess it's hard to explain if you haven't been down that road before. But that was the beginning of that education for me, and I started spending more and more time going to ceremonies, traveling, doing things, and basically taking care of my spiritual self.
Mm-hmm.
But and then from there, I guess it was kind of hold on to your hat. Shortly after that, something happened in my life that was just devastating. My daughter was abducted. She was like 11 years old. And somebody who had come to my campground, whose car broke down, I helped him get his car fixed. When he left, he abducted my daughter and took off. I didn't know that this guy was who he was. And this was devastating to me, you know. We tried tracking my daughter down. We called the police. Apparently, days before that, he tried to abduct a girl from the high school in Adams County, up at Adams Friendship there. And the other students intervened. But here with his car broke down, here I'm thinking, I helped this guy out and to get his car running, and he abducts my daughter. And as I looked into it, he had a history of this. So I'm just totally terrified. Am I ever going to see my daughter again? What? You know? And the police wouldn't help for 72 hours because, them little kids, they're just runaway. You know, I said, no, I have proof she was abducted by this guy who has a criminal record for abducting people. And they wouldn't do nothing. And I know Judy and I, my wife Judy and I were, I don't think I slept for a week straight, you know. I was trying to figure out what can I do? We reached out. There's this fellow who had a television show whose son was abducted and unfortunately killed and dismembered. John Walsh, I think his name is. We called him and his organization, and he put all his resources to help us locate our daughter. And one of the things, I think the guy had stolen some of my checks and was cashing them, so we were able to track them. We tracked them to Chicago, then I think it was Pennsylvania, North Carolina. We kept missing them. Wherever we'd see that there was a cash check, we'd call the police. And finally the word got out to all the banks, and they made the rounds back to Chicago again. And when he tried to cash a check there, they grabbed my daughter, called the police, and I was able to get my daughter back. Unfortunately, the guy got away. But I got my daughter back home. And you know at home where our arbor is?
Yeah.
There's a reason it's there. I was so devastated, going days without sleep and feeling so helpless. I found myself going out into the woods, and right where that arbor is, I was sitting down in the woods. Wasn't cleared off. It was all thick woods then. And I just sat down. I felt like I was crying for hours and praying. And to Kohel, you know, God, Creator, please help me bring my daughter back and keep her safe. And I made a commitment, and I don't say this to too many people, but I made that deal. You know how you deal with God? If you do this, you know, well, I did that. And you said, bring my daughter back. I will do whatever you want. I will serve you if you want me to do that. And I made that commitment, and it wasn't 24 hours we had our daughter back. And I could have said, oh, remember that? Never mind. You know?
Yeah.
No,
Right.
I didn't. And I had told some of the people at ceremony shortly after that story, and there were some elders there, and they looked at me and they give me that look, you know, what are you going to do with that? You know what you need to do.
Did you know?
Yeah, I knew what I had to do. That was the biggest change in my entire life. I gave up everything I was doing and started helping people and learning how to do that. And I would go out, different ceremonies all over the country. I was going to ceremonies, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, the Pacific Northwest. I was traveling everywhere and learning and asking questions from the elders. And, you know, maybe if I was Catholic, I would have enlisted in a program at the seminary and become ordained. But Native culture doesn't work that way. We don't have a class to become a Native spiritual leader. The best way I can explain it, it's the elders who choose the future leaders. Through their wisdom and knowledge, they look about and they see who's who and what's what, and it's them who groom the next generation of leaders. And I guess for some reason, a lot of them thought that I was potentially one of those future leaders, so they started teaching me. And I started listening, paying attention, doing what I had to do. And a lot of years were put into that to get to where I guess am today. And now I'm one of those elders looking in the same way. Who will be the next generation's leader, you know? Mm-hmm. Over the years, I've learned so much. All the things many elders have taught me, they have passed away. Their knowledge is my knowledge, and I owe it to them now to pass it on to the next generation. So that kind of bothers me, worries me a little bit. It's a huge commitment. A lot of young people don't want to go down that path these days. They've been, I guess, I don't know, lack of a better term, our traditional ways. When white settlers came here, and then there was all the battles between Native people and the military, there was attempted genocide. Then that didn't work, so okay, let's try assimilation. And that's had a huge impact on Native community. So there's a lot of struggle going on keeping traditional ways alive, because a lot of young people, they just don't know. You know?
One thing I want to say is
I talk too much.
No. That's why we're here. But yeah, with regard to the arbor, I've never been involved with anything that happened at the arbor. I didn't know what it was, but one day early on, me and Fonnie were just kind of wandering the land, and we came upon it, and we both came to a spot. I've never experienced anything like this. We both came to a spot where it was just like a barrier. You know what I mean? It felt there was nothing physically there, but we just got to a spot. There was just this heaviness, and both of us stopped, and we're like, we can't go any further. I've never experienced a place like that. There was just this heavy energy around it. We're both like, yeah, we can't go in there, whatever it is.
There's a lot that was going on in there, and we haven't had a ceremony there in a number of years, and that's something that's bothered me. But I'm trying to have faith that it's for a purpose. We did ceremony there 4 years, and maybe that's all that needed to be done. I brought back a ceremony that had been lost, a spring bear dance celebrating renewal of life in the springtime. And I spent a number of years trying to find out about that ceremony. And it was, again, I said, a lost ceremony. The bear people, the medicine people, who were what they call the bear people, they were all killed off because they were considered the strongest, most powerful, and they were considered a threat. So when they killed most of them off, there was no one left to continue those teachings. And I spent a number of years traveling around talking to elders whose fathers and grandfathers were part of that. And most of them didn't remember much. So I found myself going up on the hill on Blecha, Vision Quest, lack of a better term. And I spent time in South Dakota on Bear Butte praying 4 days, 4 nights, no food, no water, asking for guidance. And then finally, after about 3 or 4 years, I was on Mato Tipilo. It's called House of the Bear, Devil's Tower, like they call it, in Wyoming. And I was praying there, fasting and praying. And I was given a clear vision for the ceremony. And I then went around for another year trying to get validation for that vision. And most of my peers and other elders at the time said, again, you know what you got to do.
Yeah.
You can ignore your vision or you can follow it. And I did. I followed it, and we had that ceremony. So I woke that back up, that bear, so to speak. And that bear represents strength, and family. And the world needs that today. The world's pretty messed up. A lot of people are struggling. We're suffering through a lot.
Yeah. And I want to touch a little bit on this dynamic of what you need to do. And because I know I've heard both you and Judy talk about this dynamic of elders telling you, no, when you embark on this path, there's no security, there's no side job. You put your faith here, and you walk, and you are taken care of. And I just want to hear what that actual experience is, because I think from the outside it could be romanticized, but I think from the inside, knowing you guys even as a little bit that I do, there's something that's like, wow, these guys have given it up.
I know you asked me that question a long time ago, and you were hoping that I would talk about that here today, and I was thinking about that again yesterday, and just kind of shaking my head, because just recently my wife was telling me, well, I'm looking at the budget, and with everything and all this, we're coming up like $500 a month short again, going forward. And what are we going to do? Well, I can't just quit what I'm doing and go get a job, I could, and this is what I was faced with a long time ago. And I remember we were having such a hard struggle, and the way things shifted, and my life turned from just plenty of money, working construction, living comfortably, to all of a sudden now honoring that commitment, learning and dealing with these spiritual ceremonies and starting to help other people, and that to not having enough money. And I had my house up for sale, my campground, because we couldn't pay the mortgage. We couldn't keep it up. It was impossible. I wasn't making any money. I was doing spiritual work full time, but that has no income. It doesn't pay unless someone chooses to offer a gift or something, you know. And I talked to some elders at that time and told them I can't keep this up. I said, we're going to lose everything. And I remember, I think it was Wallace Black Elk had told me, we were at Sundance, and there was, the day was done in the arbor, and we were all sitting around the fire, and there was a bunch of elders. Wallace Black Elk, CeeLo Black Crow, Godfrey Chips, these guys are all gone now. But I was sitting there in the back listening to the elders talk, because that's how you would learn, you know. And I remember after everybody was getting tired, Wallace asked me to help him back to his camp because he was so old he couldn't hardly walk. He was in his 80s. So arm in arm, you know, I'm helping him away from the fire, and he's I'm holding on to his one arm. When we got into the dark, he says, I'll never forget this. He says, that's okay, you can let me go now, I'm good. And finished the walk himself. He was the old box. He's trying to make out to be like he can't get along that good. And when he could, good. But I got back to his camp and I was going to go back to my own camp. He said, no, Bob, stay. Sit down. Let's talk. And he talked, and that conversation came up. And he said, if you are going to lead the people and do what you're doing and continue, you can't work, you know, a 9-to-5 job or whatever and still do this. This has to be your job. I said, how do I pay my bills? How do I eat? You know, how do I, you know? And our world teaches us, like I talked earlier, growing up, thinking, yeah, being a young man, and part of it is work hard, you'll be successful. He said, you must have faith, he said. He said, you made a commitment to the Creator, and Creator's done right by you up to this point. He's guided you and led you in the right way and to the right people to learn the right things. You have to have faith moving forward that he's going to take care of you. I could not wrap my head around that. There was so much doubt that I was wrestling with. But I decided I'm going to listen to Wallace and see what happens. And with the campground up for sale, I was failing my family, but I kept going. And a couple months later, it was still up for sale. All of a sudden, I got notified that I was a recipient of a national award for the Youth Recreational Foundation for helping young people, and was flown to Denver for a big ceremony where they gave me a $50,000 gift to continue. Yes. And that came out of nowhere. And all I could think of is what Wallace said. You just keep doing what you're doing. And you have to have faith that it's going to work out. But we're not brought up that way. We're brought up, and that's our government, I think, that puts that onto us, that we have to work and make that paycheck and pay in those taxes and be part of that whole business model of, you know, democracy and stuff. And this was so much different than anything I ever experienced or learned about growing up. And here it's working somehow, and it's still working to this day. I don't know how we do it. I know just before COVID hit, I was able to refinance my property. My mortgage was getting out of hand, and I had borrowed off my equity. Mm-hmm. So actually, I owe more on my property now than what I paid for it 28 years ago. But nobody would touch me because I don't have a job. Yeah. You know, so I couldn't get refinanced. And finally, I made some prayers. We went ceremony. Lo and behold, I get accepted, refinanced through a credit union just before everything went south with interest rates and COVID hit. So I'm locked in now for 20 years at such a low interest rate. Again, I've been taken care of. A little amount my mortgage costs now we're able to make, you know. So somehow we're doing it. We're still trying to figure out how to manage taxes and insurance, but at least we have the lights on, you know, and a roof over our head. Wow. So again, another leap of faith there, that there's no reason that all should have worked out, but yet it did.
Yeah.
And so, okay, you know, so having faith in something that, yeah, is scary, very scary, you know. I know my wife, a lot of her friends, I call her my half side, that's part of Lakota marriage too. You know, that joining of the spirit, you refer to your spouse as your half side because your spirit's been joined. I'm one half, she's the other half of the spirit. So we often will refer to each other as half side, you know. But I see her friends, you know, they've had husbands who've worked all their lives and had great pensions and they're just set financially, doing well. I'm a man. I have some guilt that I haven't been able to provide all those luxuries for my wife. But one thing, she's been understanding and has always been at my side. She could have left me a long time ago if she was into it for the money, I guess, and she hasn't. But we do, I know, both consider ourselves extremely wealthy spiritually, and that's totally different than what's on your bank statement, you know. I've learned that that's not wealth. That's financial wealth, but true wealth is within your spirit, your soul, your heart, you know. And because that money you're not going to take with you. You can't take it with you.
No, and yeah, I haven't really thought about it before, but yeah, if you had cashed out and been like, no, I'm sorry, I don't have faith, I got to go back to work, we wouldn't know each other, you know, and I wouldn't have had the opportunities to be involved with you guys for the last 7 years or whatever, and just to have this impact, you know, and it's hard to quantify what it is. I mean, you've been doing this for so long, it's just like, to me, being able to participate in Sweat Lodge is just such a privilege, you know. It's like, wow, I can't believe I get to do this, you know, and just to be reminded and to learn about feeding a spirit, because most of the people that I come in touch with aren't very happy, you know. There's no mechanism for feeding the spirit. They're just kind of wandering blind. It's just like, damn.
Yeah, and we have a troubled society. You look, I hate to even turn on the news in the morning, because it's regularly how many people have been shot overnight and what mass shooting going on here, there, or wherever, and it's just insanity. It's just craziness. And the leadership in our country, well, I don't even want to go there. I don't think they're very good leaders, put it that way. You know, something needs to be improved. And it has to start with us, within ourselves. I think it's the Dalai Lama who had said, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
That is a powerful statement when you think about it. But if everybody bought into that, things would be a lot better, I think.
Yeah, and as far as being a spiritual leader, I mean, I'm a skeptic about everything that I engage with. You know, and I think the thing about you, I think that really captured my trust is that you seem to be a guy that lives at the ground level. You know, I've never felt talked down to by you. You know, I've never felt that you hold yourself in any kind of different place than everybody else.
You need to be humble if you're a leader. Too many leaders get caught up into power and greed and different things like that. In Native leadership, you know, the teaching of humility is important. And, you know, someone told me once, I forget who it was, one of my teachers, Melvin Graybear, who was a Sundance intercessor, a Uweepi man, also a different ceremony that he would do. But he said, don't let people put you on a pedestal, Bob. He said, if you're going to do that, you need to know if you can handle the fall, because the higher you let them put you, the farther you're going to fall. And I thought about that. There was some really important wisdom there. And we like to feel good about ourselves. So if someone's talking good, you'd like to soak that up,
Yeah.
because we like to feel good about ourselves.
Yeah.
But that's a trap too.
It's a slippery slope.
You can get caught up in, and then you start needing that all the time, and to be a good leader, you need to stay humble.
Yeah, and so one thing I'm really personally curious about is you've given your life to this way, going into prisons, working with people at the bottom of life's experience. Over the course of the years, it just strikes me you've worked with so many people, and essentially all of them have left. And I'm just kind of curious, like for me, just that human dynamic of like you put yourself out there helping people, and for the most part, everybody disappears.
Yeah.
And it's just, I just can't imagine what that must be like. But it's like, man, we've been there for you, and all of a sudden now you don't pick up the phone. Just how do you reason with that?
I've wrestled with that here and there, but that's not why I'm doing this, and I've had to come to terms with that. I joke around. Yeah, over the years it's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And I joke around with Judy, my half-side. I said to her one day, what do you think if everybody showed up we know for Sweat Lodge at one time? What in the world would we do?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm good with that. I just good with that. People come for help when they're struggling, when they're suffering, when things are going. If I don't see anybody for a long time, I know one of two things: they're doing real well and they're busy with their lives, children, whatever it may be, jobs, or for some of them, I know they've fallen off the wagon or are walking what we call on the black road, and I kind of know. So I pray for them, I pray for everyone, and just all I can do is continue day to day, be there, not at work working some job. If I sit at home every day and the phone don't ring and nobody stops at the door, that's a good day. Mm-hmm. But it can get crazy really fast. Sometimes in a day I'll get 4 or 5 phone calls, crisis going on. Someone just died here, they're asking me to come and help with that, or this over here, or whatever it may be. It can get nuts fast. So I've learned to appreciate the quiet times,
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of what you do is go into the bottom with people, right?
Yeah.
When they've lost somebody or when they're losing themselves.
Yeah.
In the prisons.
That's human nature, I've learned. People don't ask for help when things are going good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I teach that too. When things are going good, wake up in the morning, make a prayer, a short one, express gratitude. Thank you for another day. I joke around, waking up in the morning on the right side of the dirt is a good day,
Yeah, yeah.
But you'll have a good day if you take that moment and acknowledge gratitude for another day that you're looking ahead of you in the morning. The day seems to go better. And again at night, before you go to sleep, make a short prayer. Grandfather, God, Creator, another word, thank you for this day. And be grateful for having another day, because each day brings more that adds to who you are in your life, And you'll sleep better at night if you take that moment to acknowledge gratitude for the day you've just lived.
Yeah.
We could take that for granted, forget to do that. There's scientific studies done on everything, but this has been part of our spiritual program for a long time. Express gratitude in life. It's very important. Don't ever forget to give thanks for things.
Yeah.
But science has come out with great, revelations that if you experience gratitude in life, you will be happy. People who aren't happy have a problem with gratitude. Like I could have told you that a long time ago.
And that's one of the functions.
But it's true.
Yeah. And that's one of the functions, for you of dealing with people who are sick and dying, is that you remember that That's part of the deal. I think our society is really good at kind of shuffling death off to the side, and so I think a lot of us are very unhappy, never realizing, like, oh, right now there's somebody in a prison, right now there's somebody that just lost somebody, right now there's somebody that's sick. We don't often see it, so it's easy to just get wrapped up and never think about it.
Yeah, time is a friend we journey through life with. But the funny thing about that time, we think about that. When we're going to go and how we're going to go, time will never let us know until it comes. So we have to live with that,
And yeah, let's talk about the language. You say making your journey. Like, how is that conceptualized?
We look at a traditional way. We have two most sacred times for an individual's life is the day you are born. That is just a very sacred time. You have begun your journey in this world. When you were born, come from your mother's womb. The next most sacred time is when we call the robe, the body gives up and the spirit moves on. And we can, lack of a better term, make your journey, we call it, join your relatives who went before you or are born again, So that we look as the great mystery. A lot of people want to know, well, what happens when I die? Well, nobody knows. And I joke around with people, if you knew, you probably couldn't handle that.
Yeah.
If you knew death would bring a new life that would be so much better than this can often be terrible place we live in, they'd be lining up on the bridge selling tickets to jump off, because why would you want to stay here and live out your life if you knew there was something more to to move forward to? So yeah, it needs to be that great mystery. Having faith that there's something more, that's a whole different thing. That's very hard to do.
Yeah. And with regard to faith, I think that to me I think that's the most attractive thing about my experience with you guys, is that there's this sense of like, the spirits are here. You know what I mean? Like, maybe they're visible, maybe they're invisible, but they're here. The afterlife is here. This stuff is here. And it's a creator that can mess you up bad. There's just something about that to me that just hits home in a way that some of the other practices haven't. I don't know if it's the heat, the sweating and the heat and the pain of it. I don't know exactly what it is. Or just the stories that you've told about direct experiences of like, yeah, it's here. The thunder spirit can do the work or whatever. It's terrifying.
Earlier when I spoke about my childhood when I was in the house fire, I was in a coma for a month and a half or so. And I distinctly remember during that time I was in the burn unit and I basically was dying, I guess. This is what everybody told me, that the chances of me living were very slim. But there was a time I remember being in that hospital room, and I was like up on the ceiling looking down at my mother holding my hand next to the hospital bed, crying and praying for me. And I was looking at myself. And I remember that clear as a bell. I was in a bed that had this ring, a circle, so they would flip me over, had a motor, turn me over like a hamburger, like I'd be on my belly for half the day because of all the burns. They keep changing your position, but you can't move. I was in a coma, so this huge metal bed that rotated me. But I was in the room looking at that. And when I did come out of the coma, by then they had moved me into a different room with a regular bed. And I remember waking up describing all that to my mom. And I remember when I was up there looking down, I was trying to reach out and I was struggling with all I could to go to my mother, and I couldn't get to her, but I wanted to tell her, don't cry, it's okay. Mm-hmm. I remember that. And to me, that's like, there's a lot of people that talk about out-of-body experiences near death, But I had that experience. Some people will say, scientists, that's your brain close to death, firing all kinds of strange, things in your brain, and you're just kind of hallucinating this or whatever. But I don't know. For me, it was awful darn profound. And here I am, I was 12. I'm going to be 68 here in a couple weeks. I still remember that clear as a bell. I can still see my mother crying, So I don't know. I grew up thinking all along we have strong spirit. A number of years ago, I was invited to come up to University at Wisconsin-Eau Claire to speak to the medical students. And it was about that time they were trying to bring more education into future doctors and nurses about spiritual component of healing. So they wanted me to talk about that because they were starting to realize how important that is. It isn't just the scientific aspects of the medical care that provides healing, it's the patient also.
Yeah.
And how important that is. And I remember in the room there were a couple of atheists that were playing devil's advocate with me about spirit, who didn't believe in spirit and couldn't wrap their head around it at all. And I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around it when you do believe in things spiritual. But I asked them, bring out a piece of paper. I said, you write at the top 4 categories: physical, psychological, emotional, and then spiritual. And come down each column and list things about yourself that fit under each column. And most of the stuff fills up emotional, physical, and psychological. And people were really struggling with adding things into the spiritual column. I said, what I want you to do is take a look at those categories and think about it. Have you fully described in all those columns who you are? There's always something left over that you can't put your finger on that won't fit into physical, emotional, or psychological. And those are the things that belong in the realm of spiritual. And for us to understand them, maybe if you can begin to acknowledge there's something more to my existence and being than just the physical, the psychological, the emotional, you'll be on your, first steps of journey understanding the spiritual part of who you are. It sounds kind of deep and complicated, but also very important.
Yeah, and it's terrifying because we can't. I'm even terrified of what my spirit is doing. Honestly, I just don't. It seems beyond my control in some ways. It's just like, wow,
Some things need for us to be clearly black and white. We're kind of taught that, from little on in school and everything else.
Yeah. So we've got a half hour left here, and I want to talk a little bit about this thing that you do that's called the Eagle's Nest Center.
Ah, yeah.
So at some point, this is a nonprofit that you started. I really don't know when you started it. I don't know much about the inception, so I'm just kind of, when did you start it? What have you done, and where are you?
Going to go back. Earlier I was talking about when my daughter was abducted. About that time. My daughter was a young girl, and then shortly after that, she started high school. Well, kids in high school, it's pretty wild time,
Yeah.
when you're going through a lot of life changes and developing who you are. But at that time, we did a lot of work within our own house. Like one of my parenting skills that I developed for myself to deal with my children and with my half-side with Judy is I developed what they call a safe circle. Whenever someone had an issue in the house, I empowered everybody in the house. We could call a safe circle, and we had this signed agreement that if someone calls one, we all go sit at the kitchen table. I bring out an eagle feather to speak with, and anybody could talk about what it is they wanted to talk about, whether they had a grievance with somebody, whatever it may be. And whoever's holding that eagle feather is the one who talks. Nobody else can speak while that is going on. And the kids bought into that, because when they had that feather, they could talk to mom and dad, and we couldn't intervene. We couldn't interject, say nothing. We'd have to listen to them. But we learned how to speak and resolve issues as a family that way at the kitchen table, in that what we called our safe circle, speaking with passing that eagle feather around. And it worked real well. Well, what started happening, and it was mostly on my daughter's part, she started bringing friends home and telling them, well, you should talk to my mom and dad, because they maybe were friends who had parents who were having difficulty and they couldn't get anywhere. So we started helping friends of our kids from school with their issues and teaching them how to talk and find the courage to speak about the things they needed to talk about. And this got so crazy and out of hand, with so many people coming over to get help with stuff. Someone once told us, you should do something, organize, because we started getting pretty involved in financing everything we were doing ourselves. So at that time, there was a couple coming for Sweat Lodge from Chicago area. And one guy's wife was an attorney. Well, she wrote up our articles of incorporation and did everything and applied for our 501c3 and developed Eagles Nest Center for us. So then we were able to go out and apply for grants and things and not finance it ourselves. So that's what we did. Shortly after that, I got involved with running a school program with restorative justice concepts. Judy was running a program out at Eagles Nest Center called Strengthening Families, working with families and kids who were having trouble. And we were getting like referrals from human services with families who were having issues. And we did a lot of that. Unfortunately, because of my Native affiliation, I ran into a little prejudice with one of the school administrators. We had a really tough time. I don't even want to go there.
Okay.
There's still a lot of prejudice in this world, and I pray about that. And but I walked away from that. I don't do that anymore with the school system. But yeah, that's how it got started. And Emma, who you talked about earlier, who brought you to Lodge for the first time, she was working in Adams there. She would bring a lot of troubled kids.
Yeah.
We'd put them to work doing stuff, help cut wood for a fire for Sweat Lodge or clean it up or whatever, and then we bring them in the ceremony. And a lot of kids are connect with that for some reason. I think maybe because they're never judged and respected.
Yeah.
And from my point of view as a leader, I'm always in the background watching and listening and hearing what the talk is about and things. So I design my ceremonies to address people's needs without directly dealing with an individual. Like this past ceremony here, there was an individual in the Sweat Lodge that had a relapse with heroin and nobody knew about it. But the teaching I gave last weekend was for that individual directly. But I gave it in such a way I was speaking to everyone.
Yeah.
I never like to single anybody out or embarrass them or make, or they wouldn't come. But that's how I do things. I really try hard. I sit and pray and think a long time before a ceremony who I'm going to have in the lodge, what I know is going on, and try to, give teachings that will help with that.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
Eagles Nest started basically, it's my daughter's fault, at our kitchen table.
Yeah.
Helping kids find a way to deal with their parents and try to, just move on for themselves in a good way.
Yeah.
So now what? The things, Emma quit over there. She retired. So we don't get kids from there. We're in a lag right now. And that's okay too. I've thought about that. But a while back I was in Africa a number of years ago. My son was working there at a geothermal power production plant. He was helping with the drilling and he's a geologist. And he invited me over there. I spent 3 weeks over there. While we were over in Kenya, we went to Tanzania and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And when I was up there, I had this vision of using the mountain as a classroom for the old adage to get to the top of one step at a time, to climb a mountain. Well, that applies to life real well. If you want to achieve a goal in life, it takes one step at a time. So many people want to apply for a job and by the end of the week be CEO of the company. It don't work that way,
And part of that is that you're not ready. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not ready for the top. I've learned that in different areas of my life, that if you were given the top without taking the steps, you'd crumble because you wouldn't have the foundation for it.
Yeah. So I used that Kilimanjaro. We took a group of kids and climbed that at-risk kids, and we spent 3 weeks running all over the place.
When I first met you guys, you were just back from that trip, and it was just wild. I'm just like, who are these people, man? You guys are in Africa with kids. Like, what?
Yeah. I'd like to get a lot of that going again. I'm getting older and slowing down considerably, and I don't have a lot of that years left in me to do that kind of level stuff, but I'd like to pass that on. COVID also was a big thing, shut us right down. We were all ready to leave for Africa, and then COVID popped up. We were going to go again, but this past weekend we had a board meeting and discussed some things. Been trying to go to Iceland. There's some difficulties there that I brought up. Hope people aren't mad at me, but I brought up Machu Picchu or going back to Africa again. So that's what we're working on this week, trying to make some connections with that. But and to find the kids, I don't know. I know there's tons of kids out there having a terrible time. Drugs, alcohol, getting into trouble, and it can't seem to reach out to help them, and everybody complains about all that stuff. And sometimes I'll be sitting watching TV and I'll see this commercial come on from the ASPCA or something. They spend tons of money and help and effort rescuing dogs and cats and stray animals. What about our stray children and stuff? Nobody seems to put nowhere near the effort into helping our children as we do pets. It's
a little complicated.
I think
it's hard.
But sometimes I look at that and I get frustrated for myself.
Yeah. I mean, I remember. We had one kid was getting pretty close with the kid too. And then you remember he, we were missing some money from our fundraiser that we were doing. It turned out that it was him, and that was a strong lesson for me to learn at that time. It's like, man, I like this kid, I trust him, and all of a sudden you find that out. And I've reflected on the way you guys were able to react from that, having your experience, and the way that I reacted to it, which I wasn't exactly proud of. I was pretty hurt by that.
I know who you're talking about. That was a boy who didn't have a father. Again, boy, I could relate to that. And he was getting into trouble left and right. That was one of Emma's kids through the county. And he basically was a good kid. And he was just talked to you, respectful and everything, would work hard. And his grandfather just passed away. He was his only father figure. After his grandfather passed away, he seemed to go off the deep end. When he stole that money from us, I thought, boy, I could make this a legal issue and put him in jail. But what is that going to do? And I gave him the option of making it right. And then we found out there were 2 kids involved.
Yeah.
And one made it right, paid the money back, a little at a time out of his earnings. But the other one, he just up and disappeared. He ran. So I still think about him to this day and pray for him,
And that's probably why it's a little easier to deal in cats and dogs, There's not that betrayal isn't there. Now, that was a really impactful learning experience for me too, just to see the way you guys reacted to that. And for me, I didn't react the way that I wish I would have.
I
I was pretty upset.
Oh, I was upset too, but over the years I've dealt with so much of this, it becomes the nature of the things I deal with, and I found not to react emotionally. The best I can do, the wisdom I've heard, if there's something important you need to deal with, you pray about it for 4 days and 4 nights before you make any decisions. Because after 4 days, any emotional input in your decision making will have been settled away and weeded away. Because when we make our decisions based on emotion, they usually aren't the best decisions, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a good wisdom, to sit and pray for 4 days. Seems like a long time, but if it's that important, take that time to think about it and pray about it and settle yourself down. Then you make better decisions. I know life doesn't always give us that opportunity. Sometimes they want now, right now, you know. They need an answer or a decision made. Sometimes you just got to say, I'm not prepared to make that decision right now. Give me a couple of days, I will get back with you.
Yeah. One thing I want to communicate regarding Eagle's Nest is that it still exists. There's still things happening. And like you said, right now, we're trying to plan an international trip with some kids, and we're trying to recruit people to be involved. And we have this fundraiser where we work at the Packer games in Lambeau Field and make decent money doing that. And so I just want to spend our last 10 minutes here just kind of filling people in on the fact that it's possible for them to get involved. It's possible to participate in Sweat Lodge, right? It's possible to come and check it out and see what this is all about. Because I think there are a lot of people that don't have a mechanism for feeding their spirit in that kind of community. So just talk about that a little bit. Like, you're here. You're accessible.
I was hoping you'd ask me about that. You know, I live pretty humble, quiet with myself, yet I find myself real busy all the time doing things. But I need to do better at getting word out, and I don't. Like, you know, we've had difficulty with our website I thought that would be a way to get message out. But I need to put that out there. Everyone is welcome. If they want to come to ceremony and come with an open mind, a good heart, everyone is welcome to come. You know, and as far as Eagles Nest Center goes, yeah, we do need help. Most of our board is getting much older, elders basically dealing with health issues and stuff, and we need kind of an influx of fresh young minds to help move forward. You know, I hate to think I put all these years into this, and if I drop dead tomorrow, it's going to die with me. I don't want to see that happen. So I'm going to reach out that way, I guess. And if anybody's interested, like Lambeau, you know, it's a done deal for this year. We have volunteers. We only have that one stand. Everything is full. But if we were thinking better ahead of time, we could have put more volunteers in and done better as our fundraiser, which translates to be able to do more. Maybe we could do 2 trips every year or something. You know, if we had that really going well. We need to kind of, and I guess sometimes I'm guilty of being maybe too humble, not saying enough, you know. Yeah. And so, put that out there. If anybody is listening or has been listening to this and is interested in knowing more, maybe they can get a hold of you or...
Yeah, people are definitely willing to contact me on any of these platforms, or I will include... Are you okay if I include the Eagles Nest email?
Sure.
Yeah, and then, send an email there because... And we've been pretty good about having Sweat Lodges once a month, you know, and there are people that have started to go more regularly, but it's just something that people could know. It's, you know, I'm based in Stevens Point. A lot of the people I know are in Stevens Point. We usually go down there with a car full. We could have more cars, 45-minute drive. It's...
there was a time, every Saturday we had ceremony.
I know.
It was just crazy busy, tons of people coming, but things have slowed up over, and I guess I've slowed up over the years. That's a big part about it, you know.
Yeah.
And that's okay too.
And you talk a lot about how this is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be one guy puts on a service for everybody. In some ways,
Right.
you bring what you bring, but in some ways, it's also like community to do this work of gathering wood, gathering stones.
And when we do get together for ceremony, it kind of isn't like church where you show up, goes on for an hour and you leave.
Everybody asks me what time, what time this, what
it
time
was
that, how
all
much does
day.
it cost? Yeah, it's like, well, you just set aside the day, and I love that because
The couple hours the fire's going, that's an important time for socializing and teaching and learning about one another, learning about things. Then we have our time in the sweat lodge where we pray, and I'm in there singing and teaching things and dressing who knows what, but then afterwards we always have a dish to pass and a feast and more time to sit around, settle down a little bit after the ceremony and socialize. So it is a gathering for the day, really.
Yeah.
That's how we get together, and again, that's so good for the spiritual health.
Yeah, and it's really the only mechanism I have in my life anymore that just take myself off the clock. Even like this last week, I had Ella with me, so I wasn't going into the lodge, but still, just show up, leave the phone in the car, hang out with all you guys, and then if she's with me, just spend the day with her while you guys go into lodge.
Oh, yeah, I remember coming in, seeing you, Ella, snuggling on the couch watching cartoons. I just smiled real big to myself, Yeah, it would have been nice to see you out in the lodge, but I also knew that what was going on there was really special and important too for you,
Yeah, and on the way there, she was just, she said, she was like, I'm excited to see Bob, Dad. I'm not shy of him anymore. I was like, hey,
She's growing up so fast.
Yeah, and we all are, like you mentioned, and I believe that there are a lot of younger people that would care to be involved, and yeah, I guess we got about 5 minutes left here. If you have anything else you would really care to communicate about it, otherwise, like I said, I'll share the contact information for you guys and just again reassert like you're here, you're available, and honestly, I just want to communicate with you that I feel so blessed to have you in my life. Like when you tell me, like you're in my prayers, like that means something to me, and I'm like, wow, that's incredible. Really, I find that to be extremely humbling, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, the things have been real good in life, I guess. I can't complain. I could have kept going. At one point, I went back to school for industrial engineering. I worked as an engineer in an office for a year on a computer all day. I took care of everything to run a foundry, a heat treating facility, and a machine shop. I did all the logistics for production. And I sat down one day, this is not who I am. After going back to school, after I broke my back, doing construction work, I thought I'd give that a try. Something different. I can't punch a clock. I can't sit in the office, put a suit on. That's not who I am. I was trying to conform to what this country expects of us.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't do it. And granted, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But somehow, something was tugging on me from when I was young on. And it just wasn't until I got much older I realized this is the path I need to be on. And again, looking back at everything I went through, trials, tribulations, suffering, pain, all that's enabled me to have true compassion for helping others who are struggling, because I know how it feels. And that's been part of my training, I guess, all along. I look at it that way. It's been quite an interesting educational experience walking the path in this life,
Yeah.
And I'm happy I can use that to maybe help others.
Yeah. I'm happy too, and I'm extremely grateful that you have kept going. Extremely grateful. I'm extremely grateful you came here too. Thanks a lot. It was lovely talking to you. I could go for days, but it was wonderful. So thanks a lot. I cannot wait to get this out.
All right,
really
then.
Appreciate it.